では、早速一つ目の話題です。スキャンというプログラムは、我々の生活やビジネスを取り巻く、外の環境を観察して、そこで起きている変化の予兆をいち早く察知して、その意味を理解して皆様にお届けすること、そのことで一歩先の戦略検討を可能にするというプログラムです。観察している領域は技術だけではなくて、生活者、社会、ビジネス、政治経済などありますが、昨年はそれぞれの領域で大きな変化がありました。今回はその変化の一端をですね、3つの要素に分けて、今後も継続していく不可逆な変化、継続するかどうか不確実な変化、そして長期的な影響をもたらす変化、この3つに分けて私たちの考察をスキャンプログラムのディレクター、マーティンからご紹介いたします。それでは、ここからマーティン・シュワンのプレゼンをお聞きください。どうぞ。
Hello, everybody. Welcome to SBI's New Year Executive Seminar 2021. We had a challenging year in 2020, and we want to take a little bit of a look what the changes were and the new developments that we have seen and how they could play out over the coming year and also beyond over the next decade. My name is Martin Schwirn. I'm the director of the Scan program at Strategic Business Insights, and I will guide you through our journey of what the future might bring. Let's first take a look at what Scan actually is. So Scan is a program that will help you to look at the external environment, all the things that are happening outside of your direct control, to give you an awareness of what the changes could be. So we reduce the unknown and provide the awareness of the market environment. In other words, we're enabling you to open strategic opportunities, which most companies that use our services are looking for, but we're also reducing corporate vulnerabilities. As you understand what might happen in the future, you obviously can prepare for it. But we're also cutting through the clutter of all the different information that is out there, because we're looking for a particular type of information. We're looking for pre-trend topics and friction areas, which also means we're not predicting the future, but we can provide you with the awareness to prepare for what the future might be. We're capturing developments in science and technology, and this is usually what most people have in mind when they think about change, innovation, and new market environments. But we are also looking at commerce and competition. This is the area where you have supply chain changes, where new business models are emerging, and obviously, ultimately, consumers and societies, which is a marketplace which is of interest for every organization. You can also see that between those three spheres of commerce, that you can actually have the friction between those areas, that a new technology perhaps is not what commerce and competition has in mind. The service is global and multidisciplinary. It's systematic. We have a methodology that lies behind it and how we extract the information from the marketplace. And it's continuous. We've done this since the end 70s and have improved the process since. Okay, let's take a look at what the pandemic has done to us in 2020 and what might happen going forward, even if the pandemic hopefully ceases to exist. So there are some areas where the question is, will we actually continue the way we learned to operate in 2020, or will we actually go back to the way we lived our lives in 2019? Let's perhaps look first at the changes that are likely to stick in one shape, form, or another, where we can see that the world might not go back to what it was before. So these changes are transformations in retail. It's the adoption of robotics technology and virtual collaboration. A lot of them are not new per se, but the developments accelerated in 2020 because of the need to eliminate human interaction or reduce it, because of social distancing and because of shelter-in-place policies. But we might find that a lot of the changes actually going forward we might find beneficial, and we wouldn't go back to the way it was before. Let's take a look at the transformation in retail. So there's the obvious switch from, or move from brick and mortar stores to online environments and e-commerce platforms. That shift is now going on for more than 2 decades, but it has clearly accelerated in 2020. And we expect that this will actually continue to exist, in part because now new consumer segments that weren't used to online environments have used it for the first time in 2020 because they had no other choice. We also have seen that a lot of contactless technologies have found their way into brick and mortar stores, and even newer applications. So the device you're seeing here is Google's digital assistant that now allows you via voice to make payments. So you do not have to log into your account anymore. The system will recognize your voice and automatically initiate the payment process. So the idea is everything is becoming more seamless and contactless. Now, what is happening with a lot of the brick and mortar stores is that they don't necessarily become useless. So a lot of retailers have realized, well, it might not be a retail consumer environment anymore, but it could still very well fit into the logistics of their operations, including users' warehouses and to ship out products. So Target, for instance, acquired 2 companies, and they argue because they have such a footprint in the United States, they could deliver products within 20 minutes because they have stores all over the place. Robotics technologies. So the sad truth is that a lot of the food processing plants, particularly meat processing plants in 2020, had high rates of infection. This is an area where a lot of the robotics technologies, the implementation has accelerated. So that was going on before, but Tyson Foods has ramped up their investments, and they are at $500 million since 2017 to make the process automated. We've also seen that technologies, robotic technologies, on the upper right, we see Spot by Boston Dynamics, have become a commonplace, or not commonplace, but they have been introduced into real world environments to roam around and to check for shelter-in-place policies. Before, we have seen Nightscope, for instance, having parameter control, but now being in consumer environments, that's a different ballgame. We also see in supply chain partners automating across the supply chain. So Paistro is a provider of a pizza baking robot machine, and KiwiBot is a delivery robot provider, and the two paired up so that the entire process can be automated, from the manufacturing of the pizza to the delivery to the customer. Virtual collaboration obviously has existed before, but we know that Zoom and Zooming has become a term that nobody likely, or only a few of us, would have known about in February 2020. So it is a success story. And what it did is it introduced virtual collaboration and meetings not only into business environments, but we had virtual parties where people got together on Zoom, had drinks or played games. So it is now much more common in the private life. But there are more solutions. So Slack, for instance, has filed a complaint that Microsoft Teams, both of them have virtual collaboration software, is bundling software. So there's an antitrust case. We obviously also have WebEx. Some people use Skype. We have new applications such as Portal, which is trying to introduce life-size holograms for virtual collaboration. And in the end, we have a lot of gaming applications such as Minecraft or Roblox, sandbox video games that actually would lend themselves to become virtual environments in which people can collaborate. And it has become more common. People are familiar with it. They might not like it all the time, but it has not been that unfamiliar territory that it was perhaps in 2019. So this will be an area that will continue. Then we have the uncertain impacts, where it's perhaps not completely clear what will happen over coming years. We have seen that there were effects on commercial and residential real estate. We've seen that actually some second-tier cities have become more interesting, in part because of the changes in the real estate. We've also seen that some social problems, unfortunately, have become very obvious, and perhaps there could be a change or it could go back to normal. And finally, on an individual level, some people really enjoy staying at home. Other people would love to go out again. So this is a tug of war, what people want. And most people will like to see a mix of the two. Let's look at them. Effect on commercial and residential real estate. Commercial real estate, clearly, stay-at-home orders made a lot of the commercial real estate essentially useless. In fact, so useless that REI just finished up their brand new campus in Seattle, and they decided to sell it right away before even anybody moved in, because they believe that a new HR policy allows people to move and work from wherever they want to. So which means now people working from home realize, well, if I work from home, home doesn't need to be close to where the office is. So they could move somewhere else. They could move to the suburbs or to smaller cities. Now, a lot of city planners are afraid that what that might actually do to city centers that are currently commercial hubs. So there could be a threat for urban environments as we know it, or once the pandemic resides, people might realize that urban centers such as, for instance, Tokyo or San Francisco or New York have a lot more to offer than just work. They are centers of entertainment, of culture, of meeting, of bars. So people might decide, well, now that it's safe to go out again, I actually do want to live in a city. So this will be an area to monitor and see how it develops. As people move somewhere else, remote might become a relevant term because everybody might be remote, so to speak. And people might decide that they go to other areas. We've seen that in the Midwest, for instance, cities and entire regions are spending money on attracting the talent, mainly from New York and in San Francisco, which would be the case in the United States. But also areas such as Hawaii are offering deals for flying back and forth as a potential way to attract talent. And we've even seen that Bali in Indonesia is trying to see if they can leverage their existing infrastructure for digital nomads to attract perhaps not only individuals and workers, but also entire companies. So on the other hand, many companies have realized that the big tech companies such as Apple, as Facebook, Amazon, or Google are perhaps providing us with services that are not necessarily what we really need. So there might also be a shift in what kind of innovation we're looking forward to over the next coming 10 years. As this is happening, obviously human resources professionals will have to see what the pay structure will be. Are you supposed to pay somebody who is in a second tier city as much as somebody who is in an urban center such as New York? That all will have to play out as we are moving into the next years. There was a very dark side about 2022 because many schools had to close, and really made it clear, it brought to the forefront that some people have the means to have online classrooms, to have their computers, to have digital access, and other people do not have computer and digital equipment. We've also seen that in the United States, at least, a lot of families were completely reliant on the free meals that the schools provided. We've also seen that the lockdown made it hard for people that are in domestic abuse situations to escape. And finally, perhaps the darkest of all sides, the global trade of organs has increased because people became desperate. Now here we could actually see a world in which organizations move forward and address those issues that have become more obvious. We could unfortunately also envision a world in which in 2022, everything goes back to normal and those uh, inequalities continue to exist. So again, a situation where it depends on how the world will develop. And there's a tug of war between spheres of lives of individuals. So we have people who really want to go back to the normalcy. We have other people who really enjoy the flexibility and the time with their families and the way they can arrange their work. And we have people who kind of mix and match. So people who are taking fake commutes. They work at home, and for the most part, they like it. But as they work from home, work life and professional life and private life, it all becomes a little bit meshed together. So they take a commute, which means a walk across a park or just around the block in the morning to indicate in their brain, I'm now entering work. And in the evening, they take a stroll or open a drink to indicate now my private life begins. So we will see a lot of different ways how people deal with it. And that obviously has to be seen also what human resource policies will provide. And then we have a lot of the long-term consideration, things that won't necessarily change in 2021 or 2022, but will over time become part of life. We will see that space to maintain social distance will change. We will see new ways to track the spread of diseases. R&D will accelerate in part because the pharmaceutical industry has shown how this can work in a fairly short amount of time. And obviously AI, which has made it into a lot of industries and applications, has found its way in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. Let's take a first look at the redesign of space. If you go back to 2000, and it might be difficult to remember, it was easy to go to the gate and greet people at an airport. There were no checks, there was no control. You didn't even need to show your ID. Then in September 2001, we had the attacks and everything changed afterwards. So end of 2001, you might remember there were preliminary barriers. People just put something up, try to kind of invent new system, how to slow the traffic, how to check people. But over time, this has become essentially very clear barricades. It's an organized system. A lot of the benches in public spaces look like benches, but are actually barriers for cars so that bombers couldn't make their way to a building. And we could see something similar in the retail environment that currently has makeshift approaches to keep the distance at one-way paths throughout the store. But over time, we will see that those contactless and social distancing applications will become more designed and purchasable, and there will be professionals that can look at those environments and make sense of it. Then we have the implementation of systems that will track the spread of diseases. And here we enter a space where we have public health on one side, but also privacy issues as thermal imaging technologies, surveillance cameras, and facial recognition systems will try to guide healthcare, but also provide issues with privacy. And then we have the acceleration of R&D. Pharmaceutical companies have learned to take new test regimens and learn to collaborate among each other. And governmental organizations have learned how to speed up the process of certifying drugs. So this obviously will guide the pharmaceutical industry going forward, but we will also see that other industries will take a look at it and will see if there are some applications that they can make use of for their applications. And then AI finally has made it to the healthcare industry in a big way to predict pandemics potentially, but also to better understand how diseases spread, how it can prevent it, and what treatments could be beneficial. So in the end, if we look at the future, as I said at the beginning, we cannot predict the future. It is impossible to predict the future. And uncertainty has certainly increased in many spheres of life, at least for 2020, and we hope that it will go back to a little bit of normalcy. But we can develop buckets of developments that have a fast changing rate, buckets where we have changes where we're not sure if they will stick or go back, and long-term developments that will have to play out over coming years, if not decades. So we will have these three areas that will be able to guide our thinking moving forward as we develop scenarios, what the coming years might look like, to then help us guide our developing our strategies and the way we are addressing the market. And I obviously hope that you enjoyed the presentation, that you got a little bit of an understanding how we try to make sense of the future. And I am looking forward to working with you in 2021 and 2022. All of you, I wish you a great 2021. Thank you so much for your attention.
ありがとうございました。今、マージンがお話ししたようにですね、コロナの情報もいくつかのバケツ、カゴに分けて整理することができます。そして、情報に文脈をつけて、つまり自分の会社とか自分の業界にどんな影響があるかを考えてみることで、記憶に留めることができます。それはつまり、頭に文脈のある情報理解というレセプターを立てることだと思います。こんな具合ですね。で、一度このレセプターが立てばですね、ここに新たな情報がやってきた際に敏感にそれを受け取ることができると。こんな具合です。実際に情報に触れるだけではなくて、その情報がその情報に自分なりの文脈を持つっていうことは、新たな企画を立てなければならない皆様方に求められている要件かと思います。自社のあるいは、自分自身の部署、グループにですね、そうした半歩先んじて考える力をつけたいと、あるいは主体的に未来に向けた仮説構築をできるようにしたいとお考えの方は、ぜひこのスキャンというプログラムをご検討ください。あともう一つ、このスキャンプログラムはですね、SBI が発見した変化の予兆をご提供するというだけではなくて、そのスキャンのプログラムに参加されている方で作られるコミュニティにご参加いただくことで、異なる業界の企画者の方の発想に触れるということができるというのも大きな魅力だと思います。今回のパンデミックの際もですね、スキャンのコミュニティの皆さんは、これまでに観察してきた変化の、これは加速案件だねとか、これは新たな予兆ですねと、非常に冷静に分析されていたというのが印象的です。コミュニティ、スキャンにご参加いただくためには、この年間費用ということをお支払いいただき、スポンサーになっていただくということで可能になります。このプログラムにはですね、個別のワークショップを実施する権利も付帯しております。クライアント各社の個別の問題意識に合わせて、どんなワークショップにするかということ、場合によっては他の業界の方を招いてのワークショップなども設計いたします。ぜひお問い合わせください。ちなみにですね、このスキャンのお試し版としてビジネスインサイツワークアウトというミニセッションもございます。ご関心のある方はこちらについてもお問い合わせください。